Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about branding and having a personal brand as an illustrator, and specifically some of the anxieties and questions that you guys have about that topic, about branding for illustrators or branding for creatives or really any sort of personal brand. So I'm actually really excited to talk about this, and I really appreciate everybody who sent questions in about this, and just am enjoying this format in general because I honestly never would have thought that I actually had anything to say about this topic before somebody asked me. So thank you for asking me and giving me a chance to share what I know with you guys. All right, so the first question is, do you know anything about current illustrators whose professional name and brand name does not match their legal name? So this person had a longer question kind of built around it, but they were curious if it's okay basically to do that, if it's okay to have a brand name as an illustrator that doesn't match your legal name. So just off the top of my head, the first three that came to mind were Andy J. Pizza, so Andy Miller, who goes by Andy J. Pizza. He's the person behind the Creative Pep Talk podcast and is also an extremely successful illustrator. His URL has Andy J. Pizza in it. He pretty much always introduces himself that way, but it's not his legal name. So that's one example. Another example, I'm sure if you watch this channel, then you probably watch her channel too, is Franerd. So Fran Meneses, who goes by Franerd, but that's not her legal name either. It's also her domain name, pretty much all of her social media handles. And then another one is Adam JK. And these people are all really successful professional illustrators who are using some version of their own name. So it connects with their name, obviously, but it's not their legal name necessarily. So basically, another way I thought of thinking about this is pretty much any illustrator whose social media handle isn't their name. So, and that's really, really common. Mine is my name. Mine is just Kendall Hilligus. It's really boring, but a lot of artists and illustrators use social media handles that are different from their legal names. And because social media is such a it's such a big part of a person's brand and a person's identity. So that would be another big reason to consider it as a name that they're sort of doing business under rather than their actual legal name. Next question is, how does using a pseudonym work when it comes to contracts? For a contract, you have to have whatever your legal business name is on that contract. So if you have filed some sort of a business registration, or if you've done an LLC or an S Corp or something like that, you have had to set what your business name is. So my business name is just Kendall Hilligus because I'm just an independent contractor. But if you have chosen some other business name, then that is what needs to be on your contracts. That's really the biggest, most important thing to be aware of here, is that whatever you put on your contracts, on your invoices, specifically on your invoices, that is who the client is going to pay. So if I were to write Kendall Pie on my invoice, and it's not an actual business entity, a business that could have checks or have a checking account or receive payment, and then the client writes out a check to Kendall Pie, I'm not going to be able to do anything with that. So that's why all of my contracts, all of my invoices always have my full legal name, and I'll even have a section. Sorry about the noise. The windows are open today because it's nice. I'll even have a section in my invoices that specifically states, who to make payment out to. So that would be really the one big consideration there. I hope I answered that question well. If it's not clear, let me know in the comments. But basically, yeah, look into your own city governance if you're wanting to legally register your business under a different name. And if you just want to use the name without legally registering it or starting it as a business, then you by default will just be an independent in the US, will be an independent contractor working under your own name. And that's what you should put on your invoices. Okay, moving on. Do you think potential clients would be turned off by the idea of working with someone who is not using their legal name? No. I don't think that would be a big issue. The only issue is what I already mentioned, just being really clear on invoices and contracts and any sort of legal documents, being really clear on what your legal name is. So I don't think anybody would care if, if I had Kendall Pie Illustration, or just maybe my business would be called Pie Illustration. That would be strange. But no, I don't think it would be a turnoff to clients. It's really just kind of a neutral thing. So this is a very specific question, but I thought it was interesting. This person asks, I would like to use my initials HD as in HD Studios. However, there's another artist, Happy D Artist, who you may also be familiar with because they have a YouTube channel. And while I've reached out several times, I've heard nothing back. I have asked if she minded if I use my initials. Do I go ahead and use my initials or just come up with something different? I have been pondering this issue for 3 months. Okay, so to answer the very simple part of this question, I think it's totally fine for you to use that. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but from what I understand about copyright and trademark issues, that should not be a problem, just using your own initials. The trickier thing, especially related to the Happy D example. So her name isn't HD. She does have those 2 letters in it, but so do many people. Yeah, so I think that wouldn't be an issue. The bigger question, and what I would spend some time doing if I were you, in fact, I actually did just really briefly do a Google search for HD Studios, and there are a lot of people already using that name for their businesses. So taking aside any copyright or trademark issues, because again, I'm not an expert in those, I'm not a lawyer, the thing that I would think about as a creative business owner is how much competition you're going to have in using that name. So this would be true in any pseudonym or doing business as, if there's any name that you are going to call yourself that's not your real name, and even with your real name, actually, you should do some market research to see who else is working under that name, how much competition you're going to have in that name, and if you are picking something specifically, like it sounds like you're thinking of calling your business HD Studios. It's worthwhile to look into whether that's actually going to be a benefit for you or something that you're going to have to work against. So just on my brief Google search, there were a lot of things that brought that up. And then the other challenge is HD. Those letters are so strongly associated with high definition. Like it's the abbreviation. And that doesn't mean that you legally can't use them. Of course, they are your initials, but it means that you're trying to get into a really crowded lane in terms of what the search engine traffic will bring up for when anybody is looking around and searches and uses those terms. And if I were in your shoes and we're just kind of getting things set up, I would think a lot more carefully about how I could title my domain and title my business to bring me some sort of advantage in terms of search engine traffic. So the domain that you have, your URL, is one of the big things, one of the big clues as to what can be found on your website. So my name, Kendall Hilligus, a positive thing about my name is it's 2 weird names. So if anybody searches Kendall, or even just Kendyll, usually I'm one of the first things that comes up. But the negative of that is if someone hasn't heard of me, they're probably not going to be searching Kendall Hilligus. So I have had to do a lot of work to try to build in other clue words for the Google bots, like illustration and freelance illustrator and food illustration, packaging illustration, portrait illustration. I've had to put all of that into the content on the website, and I would have had to do that regardless, but it's extra important that I do that. Otherwise, my website URL, kendallhilligus.com, doesn't give any clue as to what's in that website. So studio, the word studio is helpful, but HD doesn't necessarily say anything strategic about the content of the website. So if you're an illustrator, you might try doing like HD illustration. You could search and see how much, if somebody else is already using that, how much competition there is for those search terms. That's what I have to say about that. Moving on to the last question. This isn't really a question, it's more just a comment or a topic. Having a brand feels gross to me, and having a brand feels gross to me. I feel you. And I also have had those emotions, have had those thoughts at different points in time, especially when I was first getting started. And I don't know, I would be curious to know whether this is something that really bothers new illustrators or new creative types, people who are just launching their businesses, whether it bothers them more. It used to be something I would think about all the time and feel kind of icky about, but now it doesn't really bother me as much. And maybe that's because I'm, have just gotten cynical. I don't think so, though. I'm not really a cynical person. So whether you use a pseudonym or not, and this is why I feel like it doesn't bother me as much anymore, is I've learned that whether you use a business name or your own personal name, whether you go about really trying to craft a brand from the beginning or you just kind of let things happen, you are going to have a brand. And it's something that just kind of happens regardless of whether or not you are intentionally shaping it. So you may have heard this quote. It's a pretty famous quote. A lot of people have repeated it since he said it, and I'm no fan of Jeff Bezos, but this is a good quote. Jeff Bezos has said, "Your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room." So even if you think about it that way, you could broaden it really to saying that every person, even if they're not like an online creative person, has a brand. So your mom has a brand, your best friend who doesn't have Facebook has a brand, and your brand is the things that people associate with you. So, you know, your mom's brand, well, let me see, what will my mom's brand be? My mom's brand would be like gardening and nursing, liking to do her own nails, nail polish, probably Weimaraners. I'm trying to think of the other things that would be my mom's brand. Blonde hair. Yeah, I'd have to think about that some more, but it's the things that you associate with that person. So it could be things that they like, things that they're into, how they look, what their personality is, a whole bunch of different things. But yeah, if you see something in a store and it makes you think of your friend, like that is part of your friend's brand. Maybe that feels gross to think about it that way, but honestly, for me, it takes the pressure off because I feel like, well, this is just something, we all have some form of a reputation, some way that people think about us, and it is magnified and amplified if you are, you know, an online artist person, but it's something that is going to happen regardless of whether you intentionally shape it or not. And on that note, I don't think I've talked about this on the channel before actually, but back when I was very, very first getting started, before I ever even considered something like YouTube, when I was first freelancing, I did a lot of graphic design work as well because it was easier to find, and I had a lot of referrals at the time for family and friends, and I wanted something that sounded like more designy. So I had brainstormed a bunch of names, and I still remember at one point I wanted to call myself Toast Design. I don't know why. I just like bread. And then at another point, for a while, I actually did call myself Tiny Seed Design and Illustration, and I still probably could dig up an old invoice of that. The logo was horrible because I'm not actually a graphic designer. I'm much more of an illustrator than a designer. I don't have that level of precision, but yeah, I did that for a while. I don't think I ever had a website. I have to look at that. Maybe I did and I'm not remembering it, but yeah, so I had a different business. I had a pseudonym, a different business name. I had a pseudonym at one point, and then whenever I was doing illustration, I wasn't thinking of it as a professional thing at first. As you know, if you know my story, I just was putting stuff out there on Tumblr when I was homesick, and so I had, my Tumblr was just called my name, Kendall Hilligus, because I'm a pretty straightforward person. That's probably a part of my brand actually, is, you know, my stuff is more or less realistic. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple and clean, all of that. So my point in sharing that is that I started out really trying to intentionally shape my brand and make it into something, but really my brand ended up happening over time because it was a natural expression of my personality. And at this point, you know, I've been doing it for several years now, so I have been thinking recently that I should start putting some more strategy and intention into shaping my brand and actually kind of pushing it in particular directions or things that I would want to highlight. Part of that is actually asking you guys what you think my brand is. Yikes, my camera just stopped recording and I didn't notice, so I hope it didn't cut off at a really bad part. But anyway, I probably have said what I need to say on the topic. But if you guys have any follow-up questions, please do feel free to leave those in the comments. If you have an idea for like a more in-depth question or an idea or topic for a future video, please do head on over to my website, kendallhilligus.com. See, wouldn't it have been nice if it was just like Kendall Hill Illustration, or I don't know, something simple, K Hill Illustration. That's not what it is. KendallHilligus.com/questions. There you can submit your ideas, things that you would like me to tackle in a future video. I love seeing your suggestions, so please do that. And thank you, of course, to my patrons for sponsoring this video. My patrons are monthly financial supporters of this channel, and what they do is basically they make it possible for me to make videos, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to hire Meg, who is amazing and who edits my videos. Thank you, Meg. So thank you to patrons for that. Thank you to Meg for the editing. And thank you to all of you for watching. I think that's it. I will see everybody in the next video. Bye.